Hey guys, and welcome to a new video. If you're thinking, gosh, there hasn't been a Michaela video in a couple weeks, you're right, because I have tried and failed to make the same video twice, and I will try again, and perhaps be able to do it, but I'm going to do a different video this week, and hopefully I can get that one out to you guys, and that's just talking about some of my favorite queer books. It is the last day of Pride Month, and this probably would have made more sense to put at the beginning of Pride Month when folks were looking for books to pick up, but we're gonna do it now. It's still time. It's always time to read queer books. There's no reason not to read them next month. So here's a couple of those books that I really love, some of which I've talked about before on the channel, but I figured I would do a dedicated queer books that I love video. For folks who want something light, fluffy, sweet, a romance, possibly YA, and also are interested in graphic novels, Heartstopper by Alice Oseman is great. There's 3 volumes currently published here in the US. I believe there's 4 out in the UK, and actually I believe you can also find this one online because it was originally a webcomic. So if you want it for free, I think you can still find it places online, but this guy is really sweet, really cute. Just a high school romance between 2 boys. The first volume, which is what I'll talk about, that's this guy here. The first volume talks about how they come to be in a relationship, and also that awkward, are we just friends or are we going to be in a relationship? Do you like me like that? Are you also queer or are you straight? That sort of stuff comes up in that first volume, and then it's just following their relationship through school from there. So again, if you want just a light, fluffy, queer romance, we've got a couple of boys here who might make your heart throb. In a similar vein, a book that is quick, easy to read, and also part of a series if you are interested in that. Every Heart a Doorway by Shauna Maguire, the first book in the Wayward Children series. It's a novella. This one won the Hugo and the Nebula. Highly recommend this. There are trans characters, there are queer characters. This is a great one for folks that like light fantasy. It's fairy tale adjacent. It's about the kids who've fallen through doorways into another world but have come back, and how difficult it is to reacclimate yourself to the normal world when you've grown accustomed to this other world, and how often they want nothing more than to go back to the world that they fell into. This whole series is great. I know Kayla from Books and Lala loves the series and recommends it all the time, but I also wanted to point out that there's like some really great queer representation in all of these books, and they're fast. So if you're in like a rut, or you just want something fun slash mysterious, a little bit dark, these are good for you as well. My next pick is one of my favorite horror books of all time, Into the Drowning Deep by Mara Grant. You might also know this is also Shannon Maguire. This is her pseudonym. Mara Grant books are much darker, much more violent than her Shannon Maguire books, and that's why she uses the pen name, not because she doesn't want it attributed to her name, but because she doesn't want somebody that reads one to think that the others are going to be similar. They're very different in tone. This one is about spooky mermaids. It is sort of a mix between science fiction and fantasy. I think closer to science fiction, as her description of mermaids is very scientific. In this world, this is technically the second book in the series, but the first book was a novella where a ship that had been doing a mockumentary about mermaids gets found, all hands lost at sea. Now a second ship is going out to see what happened to the folks from the first ship, slightly more prepared for what they're getting into because they know something happened. They aren't quite sure what. It is full of scientists. There is great queer rep in here, but there is also deaf characters. There are autism rep in here as well, so there's disabilities that are showing up. Shauna Maguire is really great for representation, so anything that she has written I honestly think would be good for anybody that's looking for any sort of representation. There's something in there for you. This one's action-packed and spooky, and I really just loved the atmosphere of it. If you're into the horror of the ocean and what could possibly be down there, if you're into an interesting take on the monster sort of genre, I'd recommend this one. A completely different take on mermaids, there's also The Deep by River Solomon. If you don't want a horror book, you want something entirely different, The Deep is a take on mermaids where they are descended from pregnant women who were thrown off of slaving ships. Their children were born and turned into mermaids. This one discusses things like generational trauma. It also has queer representation. The author is trans, and this one's more literary than Into the Drowning Deep is. It's much more introspective. It's talking about how we process pain, how communities process pain, and how we deal with family and generational links. What it is to lose your society, what it is to know everything about your pain and suffering of your society. All of that is explored in quite a small little book. Highly recommend this one as well. If you are into the more literary, slightly speculative bent, I would recommend Wicked Wonders by Ellen Klages. This is a collection of short stories. All of them have like a slightly speculative bent to them, but they're also quite literary. Particularly, there is a short story in here that follows a character whose gender comes into question, and I don't want to spoil it, but it's one of those things of discussing gender as a societal thing. It's something that we learn, not something that is inherent based on our genitals. There is also some queer stuff in there, female-female romances, things like that. I liked all of the stories in here. I read it last year and really loved it. I first heard of it from LeVar Burton's podcast, but if you like short stories, you like things that are a little bit weird, and also a little bit sad, because a lot of these are quite tinged with quite a bit of sadness, but that doesn't make them any less good. I would recommend this one. And finally, a book that I can't say enough about, Alatsaway by Darcy Littlebadger. This one has asexual representation in it. It is a YA book where the protagonist is Lipon Apache. She has the ability to speak with the dead and raise ghosts. One night her cousin comes to her in her dreams and says, "I've been murdered, but they're going to say it's an accident. You need to find out what actually happened." And that spurs her to travel to where her cousin was and try and figure out what actually happened. It deals with grief. It deals with supernatural creatures from several different cultures, and it's just a good romp. I also enjoyed the fact that it's a YA book with no romance in it, which is rare for YA, but it was nice to have the rep there and have that discussed, even if it wasn't really like a central theme of the book. It was nice to have it mentioned. Yeah, so highly recommend this one if you want just a YA fantasy mystery type thing. It's a quality one, and it's beautiful, and I believe it just won an award as well. Those are some of my favorite queer books. I would love to hear your recommendations for queer books down below. I read all across the spectrum of fiction for the most part, so if you have literary fiction, if you have fantasy, science fiction, YA, adult, what have you, I would love to hear it. I also have a review of One Last Stop up from earlier in the month, which I read an arc of, if you want to hear me talk about a queer romance. And I hope you guys have lovely weeks and lovely lives, and I will hopefully be back next week to do an individual video and hopefully get that video that I've tried to do multiple times now actually up and out. Gretchen gave me an idea that hopefully will get me the ability to use my words and get this out in a good fashion. There's also a video coming out on Friday where Gretchen and I are talking about another queer romance book that she picked this time, and you should get excited about that, even though it's technically after Pride Month. We read it during Pride Month, so I hope you enjoy, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye!